Flow's new combo plan, the people's plan.
Combo. Got a new combo plan. You can call anyone. No matter which network you dey on, just use your Flow.
I want a combo, but not for my belly. I feel me cell phone, so me call anybody. Call Mr. Man, call Granny. On the island, Flow, come boom.
Yes, there is no need for two phones no more. Cause with Flow combo plan, you're paying less for more.
Flow got a new combo plan. You can call anyone. No matter which network you dey on, just use your Flow.
Dial star 129 number sign to activate your combo plan today.
Hi there, very good morning to you. Time to welcome you now to Voices on Win FM 98.9. Voices broadcast on Win weekdays from 11 o'clock until midday when we break to bring you the headline news. Resume about 12:30ish to bring you the second segment of the program. And what do we do in Voices? Well, in Voices, you have an opportunity to raise issues of concern, offer recommendations, share your insights and your expertise, all for the benefit of the wider community, the wider society, the country, the region, and beyond. That's what we aim for. We try to solve some problems in this program. We have big ideas too. Our phone lines are open, 466-0989, 662-0989, 762-0989. What's on your mind today? Give us a call. Once again, we'd like to apologize to some of our listeners who are having a difficult time hearing us in some parts of the country. We're still trying to resolve our issues at the Otley's level transmission site. Heavy wind and rain prevented some work on the tower. We continue with that at the moment. Hopefully, we'll have some good news for you during the course of the morning. And our program of Voices comes your way with the very best wishes of Rams and Flow. Well, lots happening today. Last evening, Leadership Matters. Last evening, some crime statistics offered by the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Hilroy Brandy. We'll talk a little bit about that if you like. Other issues raised on Leadership Matters up for discussion. If you have the time, if you've got a chance to listen. If not, we'll play some clips for you. And this morning, the Local Observer Mission is presenting its report. An event is organized, that's on the way as we speak, at the Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Bastyr, where the churches, you'll recall that the Evangelical Association and the Christian Council provided the bulk of the work for that observer operation in St. Kitts and Nevis. They had a 3-man CARICOM team, came in on Wednesday, left on the Sunday, and gave the green light to the elections, pronouncing it free, fair, and very transparent. The Local Observer team has spent some more time. I understand they had over 60 observers in the field, and they spent some time compiling a report, and that report, we're told, is ready and is being revealed as we speak.
If you have one, hold it up and say, must the brother colors in my life. Refreshing and nice, and I drink that what we like. But stand you full of vibes, living full color. I know black and white, we do what we like. We live to enjoy life. Buster, pour it up, different flavor. Load it up. If you have one, hold it up and say, must the brother colors in my life.
Flow helps you stay connected to what matters. Simple plans and a better network mean that you can enjoy 30 days of unlimited social messaging, 10 gigabytes of reliable data to use as you like, and 1,000 local anywhere calls and texts with the always-on prepaid plan, all for $100. Keep your number when you switch to St. Kitts' most reliable LTE network. Switch to Flow. It only gets better.
All right, it's pretty quiet this morning. We don't have any callers at the moment. Right now, as we speak, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is engaged in a discussion on tourism and COVID-19 realities taking place now. It's being moderated by the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Timothy Antoine. Features as well Mr. Alan Chastanet, who is the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. A very interesting and relevant discussion. We also had a gentleman on that panel as well, a former boss of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, a guest on that program as well, Mr. Vincent Vanterpool, who, in my opinion, did outstanding work when he ran the Caribbean Tourism Organization for quite a number of years. What we'll do is share with you today some insight on that particular discussion, that conversation. We'll play a part of that now for you with introductions by the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Timothy Antoine.
A special series of public engagements designed with you in mind. Yes, we are into month 4 of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are all learning to live with this dreadful disease, even as the race is on to find a vaccine that will mitigate the situation. As you all know, tourism is our lifeblood. In fact, the Caribbean is the most tourist and travel dependent region in the world. And so without a doubt, the recovery of our region is very much hinged to the recovery of our tourism sector. Today, we are going to dissect, drill down, and engage on the issue of pandemic and tourism as we consider how we navigate this period and create perhaps a new tourism in light of both the challenges and opportunities presented by this pandemic. My name is Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you who are listening and viewing to the dialogues today. We have a very distinguished panel, and I'd like to now introduce our panel. First is Mr. Vincent Vanterpool Wallace, who is no stranger to tourism within the Caribbean and, in fact, the globe. Mr. Vanterpool Wallace is a former Secretary General and Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, CTO. He's a former Minister of Tourism in the Bahamas. He's a former hotel executive. He has straddled both the private and public sectors, and at this moment is a leading regional consultant on tourism and related services. We are delighted to have Vincent with us this morning. Vincent, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, good to be here.
Great. We'll hear from you shortly. He's very much in demand, and we're pleased that he's taken time to share his perspectives with us on this all-important subject of tourism. We also are expecting very shortly Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who, as you all know, is also a tourism expert. Prime Minister Chastanet is not just a former Minister of Tourism, a former hotel executive, a former airline executive, but he continues to work, even in his current capacity as Prime Minister, on the issue of tourism. In fact, he has been leading the charge for the OECS and at the CARICOM level in respect of working across the region on protocols for the resumption of tourism, starting with the reopening of our borders. And we will hear from Prime Minister Chastanet shortly. And so with that, we are in for a wonderful engagement today. And I am really grateful to these fine gentlemen for taking the time to be with us this morning. Before we continue, I'd like to address a few housekeeping matters, please. So this dialogue is being streamed live on ECCB Connect's Facebook page. Attendees in the Zoom session will have their microphones muted and cameras turned off to ensure the smooth flow of the dialogue. Attendees are invited to submit comments in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. To submit your questions for the attention of the panel, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Only use the Q&A box for questions, not the chat box, to ensure that your questions are seen by me and you have an opportunity perhaps to have them treated by the panel. I will read out the questions submitted in the Q&A box and direct them to the panelists for responses. We do have one of our colleagues at the Central Bank monitoring the Facebook page so that any questions from viewers on our Facebook page will also be forwarded to me, and we will endeavor to have some of those questions answered as well. I just want to encourage us to have a respectful dialogue and to encourage full participation through the submission of your comments and questions. We advise attendees to please refrain from submitting offensive content. If you do that, we will have to remove the content and of course remove you to avoid any disrespect and disruption to the dialogue. So please keep it clean. The recording of the dialogue will remain on the ECCB Connect's Facebook page for you and anyone else to view at the end of this event. If we experience any technical difficulties and lose connectivity, please reconnect to the dialogue with the link previously provided. And those are the housekeeping announcements that I wish to share. And so with that, let us begin. The way we will work it is we'll have a few questions directed to the panelists from me. After that first round, we will then do a poll, and then we are going to get into the Q&A segment. And we expect to have a lot of time for the question and answers, because we really want this to be interactive and to give you an opportunity to be fully engaged in this dialogue. So with that, we will begin the questions. Once Prime Minister Chastanet arrives, I will acknowledge that, but we will start. And so I'd like to start by asking Vincent, what are the important linkages of tourism within the broader economy that we are not aware of? So we say tourism is the most dependent, we are the most tourism dependent region in the world. What are some of those linkages that perhaps we are not as cognizant of in terms of the broader economy?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Really, first of all, congratulations for ECCB conducting this webinar, because we have always believed that the greater the understanding of the tourism sector at the highest levels of understanding the economy, the better it's going to be for everyone. And so the linkages question is really a great place to start, because you mentioned at the beginning, Governor, that the Caribbean is really the world's most tourism-dependent region. There's no reason in the world why we should not also be the world's most tourism-competent region. And when we say, talking about tourism competent, we should be in the business really of taking our expertise and our knowledge, not only using it to grow and develop our own economy, but also being able to sell our services to other people elsewhere around the world, since tourism, obviously before this pandemic, was one of the largest and fastest growing segments of the economy. So a linkage that we've never really talked very much about is selling our knowledge and our expertise in tourism to other people around the world. We think we have a decided and long-standing comparative advantage in tourism just by reason of our location and reason of the kind of God-given conditions that we have. So we think that's going to ever disappear, but at the same time, using our knowledge to go beyond. For example, the agricultural linkages are obvious, but still they are not deep enough. They should be much greater and much better. One of the things we started doing at the Caribbean Tourism Organization when I was there was creating something called Fresh from the Caribbean. And we deliberately said Fresh from the Caribbean instead of Fresh from Barbados or Fresh from St. Kitts or Fresh from St. Lucia, because we ought to be looking around our region and working together to make sure that we are maximizing the benefits. We still import far too much from outside our region in terms of some of the things that we are trying to get done. And the area right now of digitizing our economy, because so many people are so concerned about this pandemic, suddenly what has come to the forefront is really the digital development of the digital side of our business. And we see that accelerating to a degree that we have never done before in terms of connecting linkages. We are talking about things of these, the apps that we are developing in order for people to use around the region. They should begin within the region on the technical side and begin to be passed around the region, whatever the best one of that is. We talk about architecture. I mean, if you look at the construction in our region, for example, of some of the buildings that are not taking advantage of the prevailing winds, not taking advantage of the light, but we're building a lot of the properties as if we are building houses, as opposed to something that's going to be blended into the community. So everything from agriculture to architecture to financing to consulting, there are some of the connections and some of the kind of linkages that we should be developing in our region to be able to sell across the region and also sell beyond the region so that we're getting income. Because all tourism is really collecting foreign exchange and collecting expenditure from large numbers of people outside our region and within our region. And then, of course, the one area that is, I think, is one of the greatest missing pieces of the Caribbean. I mean, I continue to say that the biggest single untapped market for the Caribbean is the Caribbean itself. I mean, we should have a lot more traffic for leisure and business reasons going among and within the Caribbean instead of ceding so much of our business to Miami and some other places beyond our region. So the opportunities for linkages are enormous when we begin to look at them on a much, much broader basis and look within ourselves for developing these linkages as opposed to looking beyond and linking ourselves beyond.
Right. Thank you very much, Vincent, for that. You know, what is happening now is really, I think, a discovery of sorts for us in the region of how pervasive the tourism sector is on our economies. If you just think of the young people involved in the cultural industries who are now unable to ply their trade, we don't think a lot about them sometimes, but they are, you know, a key part of the industry, entertainment. We recognize how widespread the impact and influence, the sphere of influence tourism is. So it's a teachable moment for our region. So thanks for that. And let me just pivot now to Prime Minister Chastanet, who has joined us. Prime Minister, welcome.
Great to be here, Timothy. Thank you very much, Governor.
Great. So I will tell this little story before I pose my first question to the Prime Minister. And it leverages something that Vincent said a while ago, which is that we need to promote a deeper understanding of this vital sector at all spheres of society, including central banks and including finance ministries. And Prime Minister Chastanet actually believes that as well, because I believe in my very first year as governor, he invited me to accompany him to the FCCA meeting in San Juan to talk about the risking with the tourism sector, but also, I think, to provide me with a crash course on tourism and to open my own mind, my own perspective to how we could better address the tourism industry going forward. And I want to thank him for that. So Prime Minister, with that little anecdote, let me ask you a question as we kick it off with you. We often refer to tourism as the lifeblood of our economies. Help us, if you will, in a few numbers. What does that statement really mean?
Governor, most people who know me, and you've spent some time with me, always know that I am a numbers person. So first of all, let me deal with it from a factual perspective. In the OECS, tourism is close to 80 to 85% of our foreign exchange. Tourism, if you take a satellite accounting system in play, a satellite accounting system starts looking at the indirect impact of tourism. And very often people speak about indirect impacts on by other sectors, but in the case of tourism, it's real. So a very good example is transportation. Transportation is a big input into our economies, and it is a separate line item in your macro account. When you start to understand how much of the transportation department is influenced by tourism, then we start getting a very different understanding of what tourism means to our economy. So if you take the taxi drivers, if you take bus transportation, so for instance, the hotel operates 24/7 and has, on most cases, 3 shifts a day. The number of buses that are taking staff from work to home and back and forth. The provision of products, the truck transportation. So in the case of St. Lucia, almost 75% of our transportation sector is tourism driven. That can be applied across the board. So whether it's in transportation, utilities, 1/3 of our utility input is directly to the hotels. But then when you take all of the ancillary services that are also consuming electricity, it's an incredible number. So my last piece of evidence on this is when we had the recession in 2009, and I asked the banks themselves, to what extent are they dependent on tourism? And the number that immediately came out of people's mouths, which is the common number, is 50%. And I asked the question, okay, the loans that you have for senior staff members in the hotel sector, is that noise disturbing everybody?
No, go ahead.
We're good.
Sorry about that. When I asked the banks, to what extent were they dependent on the tourism sector, they said 50%. And I asked the question, the flower shop, where 85% of its flowers are going to the hotel sector, how do you classify that loan? All the persons who have buses that are providing transportation for the hotel sector, how do you classify that loan? Your staff members, senior staff members, that if the hotel industry were to close down tomorrow, would they find jobs to replace them at the salaries that they were earning? And if not, then the bank ought to classify that as a tourism loan. So one of the banks started that process of doing that examination and quickly came back to me to say 87%. Wow. So from an economic and integrated perspective, tourism is fully integrated into our society. The other aspect of it is that we don't understand the linkages that tourism provides to us as a region and how it can integrate into our longer term development. The countries that have a successful tourism product, Bermuda, let's take that as an example, started off predominantly in tourism. But because of now the infrastructure that was made into tourism in Bermuda, as well as the linkages of airlines, they then were able to develop an offshore financial services. Where would that offshore financial service sector in Bermuda be if there was not hotels, golf courses, and air access, and also the capacity to build the broadband width and utilities on that country? So in the case of a St. Lucia, the same thing applies. We need to learn to use tourism in a more significant way. And I'll give you a very simple example, Governor. Bananas. 85,000 British tourists come to St. Lucia a year. We have never put a brand on our banana, and a brand on the banana locally that's the same brand that the person will see when they go back to the UK. So it's proven, test after test. If I have some rum in St. Lucia, I develop a very good memory of that rum, and it creates a nostalgic feeling. So that when I see that rum on the shelf, Chairman's, I automatically make that association between my vacation in St. Lucia and that rum. And it's the point of differentiation to cause a person to buy Chairman's over Mountain Gay or somebody or some other rum. The same thing with our bananas. We know where those 85,000 people live. We know the Sainsbury's and the Waitroses in those markets. And so it's to leverage now that exposure. In addition to the 85,000 British tourists that we have in St. Lucia, there's another 150,000 British tourists that come to the Caribbean on cruise ships. There's another 250,000 British tourists that go to Barbados, and another 100,000 that go to Antigua. Now, if I can get 300,000 British households to purchase my bananas on a yearly basis, St. Lucia can sell 60,000 tons of bananas, which would be quadruple the amount we currently are able to sell. My last example is Tortuga rum cake. So a Jamaican was living in Cayman, could not get a job in Cayman, came up with a rum cake and put it in that box that he has. He sold it to one hotel, then he sold it to multiple hotels, and then it became, long before the internet, it became an order business, a mail order business, where people would write into him and he would supply it on Christmas and for people's vacations. It eventually now became into the duty-free market, and now it's on the global basis. So what's the point of this story? Is that a product started off dependent on tourism, but grew to become an industry in itself. But it was the portal, the opportunity that tourism created on a global context that allowed him to be able to do that. So when I say, and I think that tourism is the lifeblood of the Caribbean, so it's both from an economic perspective, an opportunity perspective. You spoke very eloquently about the entertainers. And I keep saying this to entertainers. The work that you're doing at the hotel is practice. And hopefully now you start understanding your audience. If you can get your American audience and your Canadian audience and your British audience to love your music, you're now creating an opportunity for yourself to become global. But if you did not have access to that market, you would never be able to get the feedback in terms of understanding whether your music is making an impact or not. The success of the Beatles is when they went to Amsterdam for 12 months and were in an international port, and they played over and over and over again. And in many ways, that's what has been attributed to their eventual success. This is what tourism brings it. It brings the world to our doorstep, and we must understand that and learn how to take advantage of it on a greater sense.
Governor, if I may just, I mean, what the Prime Minister just said,
Yes.
so many points just to amplify.
Yes.
Because, I mean, it's very rare that we get this opportunity to talk about tourism in the terms he's talking about. Classic example of what he just said about Tortuga rum cakes. There is a lady from Hong Kong who spent some time in the Bahamas. Every single year, the gift she gives to her friends and relatives for Chinese New Year is I have to send to her rum cakes from Tortuga for her to give as gifts. She encountered it first time here and thought it was such a wonderful idea and wonderful gift. Now it's spread internationally. The last point that the Prime Minister made is that what other business you know about that the people come to your country to collect, at least to get a taste of the product. And what we have failed to do is follow them back home and continue to sell the product. The third point that he made, which is talking about something, we talk about tourism satellite accounts as if we expect everybody to understand it. They don't. And maybe the people on this panel understand it. But here is a fact. Tourism is a very strange economy because the direct expenditure in tourism many times is the smaller part. It's the indirect and induced amount you collect from taxes and employment that is much, much greater. The example I use many times is here in the Bahamas, for example. Atlantis has an outrageous size of number of employees. They got 7,000 employees. I remind people that those 7,000 employees, every time they go to the supermarket, since 100% of their income comes from a visitor, every time they go to the supermarket and they pay VAT on whatever they're buying, that's tourism taxes too. And we seem to forget that when the taxi driver goes and pays taxes on gasoline and is driving somebody and the visitor spends, that's tourism taxes too. We don't seem to understand. And then tourism, there is no sector of any economy anywhere else that absorbs a broader range of skills than tourism. None. I defy you to find one. I mean, I always use the example from Sylvester Stallone, the actor. He was producing a film, and somebody asked him, who do you have working on this film? He says, well, let me give you the easy answer. I have people from MIT and people who can't spell MIT. That's the kind of range we get. And so the absorption that we get across in terms of what tourism does in our economy, it is only when it disappears, as after 9/11 and now, that people come to fully appreciate, as the Prime Minister was saying, how incredibly pervasive it is.
You're tuned to Win FM, it's 90.9. A fascinating discussion there with Vincent Van Der Poel, Alan Chastanet, and Timothy Antoine. ECCB Dialogue, Digital Dialogue, Pandemic and Tourism. And that's a clip we played for you to get some insight into the discussions about tourism, its impact, and of course why the Caribbean is described as perhaps the most tourism-dependent region in the world. We'll be back with more. You listen to Voices, Compliments Rams, and Flow.
Mustn't forget the bop.
I see you like bop too.
If I'm cleaning the garage, I need bop.
One bop for the home and one for the office.
Bop insecticide, preferred for its proven performance. Bop's fast-acting, long-lasting. Bop stops both flying and crawling insects. Get serious. Get Bop.
Like us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/ramsupermarket. Follow us on Twitter, www.twitter.com/ramsupermarket. And subscribe to us on YouTube, www.youtube.com/ramsupermarket.
Flow's new combo plan, the people's plan.
Combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow.
I want a combo, but not for my belly. I feel me cell phone, so me call anybody. Call Mr. Man, call Granny. On the island, Flow, come.
Yes, there is no need for two phones no more. Cause it Flow combo plan, you're paying less for more.
Flow got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow.
Dial star 129 number sign to activate your combo plan today.
You listen to Win FM, it's 90.9, www.winnfm.com. We're on YouTube as well, Win FM 90.9 on YouTube, on Facebook. We're on Facebook Live as well. And of course, the numbers are 466-0989, 662-0989, 762-0989. We have some overseas numbers for you as well. 718-285-6984, 718-285-6984, 305-921-4619, and 0333-344-0065. So we're going to continue our coverage of the tourism and, of course, the pandemic. Eastern Caribbean Central Bank presentation featuring the Governor of Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastanet, and Mr. Vincent Van Der Poel, former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. He's a tourism expert, well respected across the region and beyond. And I'm going to play a second part of that discussion for you. And of course, we'd like to hear what you think about the deliberations and discussions about why tourism is described as the lifeblood of the economy.
So let's talk a little bit about impact of the pandemic. Prime Minister, give us some color, if you will, of the ways seen and unseen that the pandemic has impacted our tourism sector.
Well, the most obvious way, which is something that sadly none of us could have ever imagined, that the world has been shut down, and that protocols have been put in place that have made it prohibitive for persons to travel. And once we started seeing countries put a 2-week quarantine on persons arriving in their borders, that literally shut down the airline industry. It's incredible. And the fallout of this is not going to be understood. And let me just give you one example, Governor. In 9/11, the airline industry was shut down for about 12 days. 12 days. We're now going on 8 weeks that the airline industry is shut down. In the 12 weeks that it was shut down, the following year, 2002, the airline industry in that 1 year, in 2002, lost more money collectively, that means as a group, than the airline industry had collectively made in its history. And that's with 12 days of shutdown. When you hear numbers like American Airlines was losing $77 million a day, this is an industry that is very, very high cost, and the returns on it very small because of the level of investment that is required, the skill set of pilots and nurses and mechanics, etc. And even the idea now of restarting the industry is not so simple as going like you do with your car, start it up and maybe the battery doesn't start and you recharge the battery and you go. All these planes that you see parked all around the world all have to be recertified. All of the pilots are going to have to be recertified. All the flight attendants and even the mechanics working on those planes are going to have to be recertified. And so therefore, that is the most immediate impact that we have seen. Secondly, to us down here, really the more obvious one, Governor, and you and I had many discussions about this, was the fallout of revenue. So the airport tax we were collecting, the gas taxes, as Vincent pointed out, all of the VAT consumption, because I have 14,000 persons who were employed in this sector directly who are unemployed, not earning any income. In fact, the government now is having to give them a subsistence allowance. Another 10,000 people in the ancillary services, all the persons who were doing tour guides, all the bus drivers, all the bus transportation drivers, all the businesses that depended on those staff persons for work, they themselves now have downsized. All the banks who had all the loans from the same people I was talking about, all these senior people, home mortgages, car mortgages, all those things now are having a horrific impact on our economies. And certainly everybody has come to the realization that these economies cannot even begin return to any form of normalcy until the tourism product is back open. And all of us say the same thing. What's going to be the new normal? Are we ever going to get back to February 2020 in the next couple of years? The airline industry itself has said it's going to take until 2025 for it to be able to recover. Here we are attempting to reopen our borders, and sadly we have a huge spike in cases in the US that may have an impact on when we actually are going to reopen. And even when we reopen, how many persons do we really expect to get to come down based on the new protocols that we're putting in place? So it has been very visible, and sadly, and Governor, you and I are the ones, and many of the other prime ministers and ministers of finance are actually seeing what people don't see on a daily basis, and that our revenues have dropped anywhere between 50 to 60%. And that is only now. But if in fact that this goes on for much longer, how are you going to replace those 15,000 jobs? How are they going to earn the money they're going to earn before? And more importantly, how are we going to continue earning the foreign exchange? And what is that going to have an impact on the reserves that we have in our own central bank? So we're covered for now. But if this was to go on for another year or another year and a half, as you know, Governor, then we would start seeing significant problems moving forward. And what does it mean? It means that our economies would be contracting. The contraction of those economies means that we have to reduce overheads in government. And it's going to be very, very difficult. So it's very obvious right now, the overall impact that tourism has. Sadly, and I'm sure hopefully we can have that discussion, is that what do we do from now and how do we move forward?
Right. So, Prime Minister, thanks for that. And let's move to this question of reopening, because you just touched on the real impacts of the pandemic on the tourism sector. And the question is, how do we pivot now to a resumption, a reopening of borders? You have been leading the charge at the region-wide level, at the level of heads, trying to get some consensus around protocols for reopening. Where are we at? And give us a sense of how those for example.
Well, thank you very much, Governor. The discussions have been going extremely well once we're starting to follow common sense. So the more difficult of the protocols that we have established has been the requirement to be pre-tested before you come to the country. Now, that pre-testing is being impacted because the only country we currently can get business from is America. As we speak right now, the United Kingdom requires, if a tourist comes to the UK, 2 weeks quarantine. So it means a British citizen is not going to leave the UK to come to vacation in the Caribbean to go back into quarantine. The same thing applies in Canada. So the United States is the only place where an American citizen can fly down to the Caribbean and go back without going into quarantine. So the question becomes, what protocols do you put in place? And ideally, having persons pre-tested before they come down would be the best scenario by far. But unfortunately, testing is not widely available in America. And even where it is the PCR test, which is the nose swab, which is the standard bearer in testing, Vincent and some others have been very active in trying to get Walmart, Walgreens, and even CVS to provide those tests. And we're talking about upwards of $150 US for a test. So some of the countries have adjusted themselves and basically are now testing on arrival. Jamaica and Antigua, to be exact. In the case of Jamaica, it takes you about 2 hours once you've arrived to go through their set of protocols. They also require you to pre-apply with all of your vitals. And they also connect you to an app that keeps track of where you're going around the island. And you're also required to be tested. Now, the difficulty is that if somebody tests positive, what happens? The persons they flew down on the plane with, are we accepting the fact that now that people are wearing masks on the plane, that the possibility of them being infected is substantially less, and we therefore are not going to impact any of those persons? How is it the persons are going to react when they are come down on vacation, and instead of being able to go to vacation, now we're going to put them into quarantine? Are the airlines going to accept them to go back now on the same plane if they have tested positive? Is America going to re-accept them if they have been tested positive, even though they're American citizens? And it's not a ridiculous question to ask, because many American citizens were stuck on cruise ships because the U.S. would not allow them to come back in, even though they were American citizens. And eventually they got through that, but that took some time. So this is a significant hurdle that as a region we're attempting to be able to maneuver. I would say to you at this point, they are a part of the population that want to come to the Caribbean on vacation, are encouraged with the success that the Caribbean has had in controlling the virus in our region and feel it's a safe haven. And some of them who like the tough protocols, and there are others who don't want all the different protocols. So I think that we're reaching a point where persons can either be pre-tested and save themselves a long line when they arrive in our country, or if they want to be tested when they come, that they can do so. The other difficulty, Governor, that we're confronting is one of discrimination. And I don't mean this in a racial way at all. So the discrimination is how you treat tourists versus how you treat your returning nationals. So the tourists are coming down and are going into a hotel and are being restricted in terms of their interaction in our economy. And so therefore, they're going into a quarantine environment. On the other hand, your nationals are returning home And some of us are putting them into compulsory quarantining. And so some people are saying, well, that's unfair. And to come back home, country, stay away until we know whether take temperature test, no symptoms is sufficient, then we can't get there. So there is going to be, I think, in most of the countries where we will continue to require nationals to go into compulsory or mandatory quarantining. That number that we're going to be able to bring in is going to be restricted based.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Quicks, 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 please, many, 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 many dishes and many, 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 many more.
Quicks cleans many, 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 many dishes and many, 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 many more.
Yes, Quicks cleans many, 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 many dishes and many, 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 many more.
Just one spoonful of concentrated Quicks cleans your whole sink full of dishes. Quicks, 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 clean.
Quicks cleans many, 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 many dishes and many, 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 many more.
Quicks, we wash more dishes.
Like us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/ramsupermarket. Follow us on Twitter, www.twitter.com/ramsupermarket. And subscribe to us on YouTube, www.youtube.com/ramsupermarket.
Flow helps you stay connected to what matters. Simple plans and a better network mean that you can enjoy 30 days of unlimited social messaging, 10 gigabytes of reliable data to use as you like, and 1,000 local anywhere calls and texts. With the always-on prepaid plan, all for $100. Keep your number when you switch to St. Kitts' most reliable LTE network. Switch to Flow. It only gets better.
You're tuning in to FM 90.9 on your dial. Before those ads were played and you heard the station ident as well, you were listening to Mr. Alan Chastanet, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And of course, he was talking on the program this morning, Tourism in the Pandemic, one of the programs put on by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, featuring Governor Timothy Antoine as the moderator, dealing with some very, very serious seminal issues, including as well Mr. Vincent Vanterpool, looking at tourism and the pandemic, the impact of COVID-19 on tourism, breaking tourism down into its many parts, and really telling the story of what's facing the region. Even as countries consider reopening borders, what are some of the considerations, what are some of the issues pertaining to even a longer period of lockdown? What could that mean? So we're going to continue with more coverage, but that will be in the second half of the program. We want to compliment Eastern Caribbean Central Bank for making that available to us so we can share with our many listeners. And of course, give you a chance to reflect in it. The full presentation is going to be on the Facebook page of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank as well. It's going to be on Win FM's Facebook page as well. So look forward to more in our second segment of the program. And last evening, of course, Leadership Matters returned. Leadership Matters, a program put together by the governor of St. Kitts and Nevis, looking at important issues. And last evening, the Prime Minister, the Police Commissioner, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris, and the National Security Advisor, Major General Saunders, were featured on Leadership Matters, broadcast on ZZ 90.9, Win FM 90.9, Freedom, all the radio stations. What we'll do now, we'll share with you some crime statistics offered by the Police Commissioner, and a bit later on in the second half of the program, we'll continue with more coverage of Leadership Matters. We've got an update for you coming up as well on the Local Observer team's report. That report presented this morning, and we'll certainly bring you some coverage of that when we return. The Eastern Caribbean program, Pandemic and Tourism, continues as we speak. It's actually live at the moment. So what we'll do now is give you an opportunity to hear from the Police Commissioner, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, as he talks about crime statistics in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Commissioner of Police Hilbert Brandy has been outlining the figures that show crime has been trending downwards in the Federation for the period 2018 through 2020.
At the end of 2019, there were 12 homicides. This represents an astonishing 48% reduction when compared to 2018. Additionally, there was an impressive 28% overall reduction in crime in 2019 over the previous years. Furthermore, a record-breaking number of guns, 47, were removed from the street last year as well. Another notable achievement in 2019 was the seizure of 136 kilos of cocaine, which is considered one of the largest drug busts in the history of the Federation.
Brandy was at the time speaking on the government's Leadership Matters program.
The downward trend in major crimes continue in 2020. I must stress that the Federation had recorded a decrease in major crime even prior to the implementation of the state of emergency. Crime was down by just over 30% in the first quarter of 2020 when compared to 2019. From the start of the state of emergency to now, it is dropped to 43%, as the Prime Minister had earlier mentioned. I now will give a full statistical count of the comparison for 2018 to 2020. In 2018, there were 15 homicides compared to 11 in 2019 and 6 in 2020. Shooting with intent, there was 1 in 2018 and 4 in 2019 in comparison to 1 in 2020. Wounding with firearm, there were 1 in 2018, 0 in 2019, and 0 in 2020.
The top cop provided a further breakdown for attempted murders and sexual offenses.
Attempted murder, there were 13 in 2018 and 13 in 2019 and 1 in 2020. Grievous bodily harm, there were 62 reports in 2018 against 61 in 2019 versus 41 in 2020. Sexual offenses, there were 14 sexual offenses in 2018 compared with 30 in 2019 and 15 in 2020. Breaking offenses, in 2018 there were 217 versus 128 in 2019 and now 100 in 2020.
Larceny and robberies.
Larcenies, 247 in 2018 versus 176 in 2019, now 116 in 2020. Robberies, 24 in 2018, 28 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. Firearm offenses, 14 in 2018, 22 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. Malicious damage, 124 in 2018 and 74 in 2019 and now 76 in 2020. This is the only category of crime that shows an increase for 2020, an increase of 2 crimes. This brings us to a grand total of 918 in 2018, 697 in 2019, and 399 in 2020. A difference of 298 crime less, 43% reduction.
Commissioner of Police Hilroy Brandy.
And that story there from German Abel. So that's what we have for you this morning. Stay tuned. We've got the headline news coming up at the top of the hour. You're tuned to Voices of Win FM 90.9, compliments Rams and Flow.
Flow's new combo plan, the people's plan.
That's a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your flow.
I want a combo, but not for my belly. I feel me cell phone, so me call anybody. Call Mr. Man, call Granny. On the island flow, come boom.
Yes, there is no need for to force no more. Cause it flow combo plan, you're paying less for more.
Flow got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your flow.
Dial star 129 number sign to activate your combo plan today.
You're tuned to Win FM. It's 90.9 on your dial. www.winnfm.com. I just had a call. A caller wanted to know what was the update on the situation in Guyana in terms of the elections. Well, I have this latest report here now from Demerara Waves, which I can share with you. Well, the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, late Tuesday night ordered the Guyana Elections Commission, and I'm reading here from the Demerara Waves newscast, news item. The Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, late Tuesday night ordered the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM, not to issue any results of the March 2nd, 2020 elections. And that's where we are now. The Guyana Elections Commission and its officers and agents take no step to prejudice the fair hearing of this application, including but not limited to issuing a declaration of the results of the elections held on the 2nd of March 2020, until this court issues final orders following the hearing and determination of the questions raised before this honorable court in the said application. The applicants in the appeal are the People's Progressive Party representative of the list and the People's Progressive Party's presidential candidate, Dr. Irfan Ali. The CCJ issued a temporary order after reviewing the appropriate sections of the Caribbean Court of Justice Act. So at the moment, the CCJ has issued an injunction blocking the swearing-in of any president in Guyana until the matters are being heard before the court. The CCJ said a case management conference will be held on Thursday, 25th June 2020, 3 o'clock in the afternoon via video conference, of course, with a view to a proposed hearing to determine issues raised in the application on the first day of July at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the 1st of July will be the hearing as the saga of the Guyana elections continues. And the move by the CCJ effectively blocks GECOM from using a report submitted by the Chief Elections Officer, Keith Lowenfield, that he presented to the Commission's chairman, Claudette Singh, retired Justice Claudette Singh. And the Commission has not yet met to consider the report, which has been described as fraudulent by the opposition. And that report puts the APNU, that is the incumbent, APNU and AFC, in a one-seat majority. So more to come in later newscasts as we're fond of saying here on Win FM 98.9. So, in short, no president for Guyana at the moment, no new government for Guyana at the moment. CCJ's issued an injunction. 1st of July will be the hearing. It's going to be case management before that, of course. And then perhaps we'll see what happens next. This has been an ongoing saga. Just when will it end? We don't know. Perhaps it's close to completion. Perhaps we're close to another chapter. Only time will tell. Stay tuned. We've got headline news coming right up right here on WIN.
Hold it up, need the thirst quencher in my cup. If you have one, hold it up and say, pass the brother.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the Win FM Headline News. The Win FM Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, Carib Brewery, CNC Trading.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime, and bitters. Live, love, be.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Dealing well with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we've got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealey Walwyn, people you can trust.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic, and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 466-8221, or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Commissioner of Police Hilroy Brandy has been outlining the figures that show crime has been trending downwards in the Federation for the period 2018 through 2020.
At the end of 2019, there were 12 homicides. This represents an astonishing 48% reduction when compared to 2018. Additionally, there was an impressive 28% overall reduction in crime in 2019 over the previous years. Furthermore, a record-breaking number of guns, 47, were removed from the street last year as well. Another notable achievement in 2019 was the seizure of 136 kilos of cocaine, which is considered one of the largest drug busts in the history of the Federation.
Brandy was at the time speaking on the government's Leadership Matters program.
The downward trend in major crimes continued in 2020. I must stress that the Federation had recorded a decrease in major crime even prior to the implementation of the state of emergency. Crime was down by just over 30% in the first quarter of 2020 when compared to 2019. From the start of the state of emergency to now, it is dropped to 43%, as the Prime Minister had earlier mentioned. I now will give a full statistical count of the comparison for 2018 to 2020. In 2018, there were 15 homicides compared to 11 in 2019 and 6 in 2020. Shooting with intent, there was 1 in 2018 and 4 in 2019 in comparison to 1 in 2020. Wounding with firearm, there were 1 in 2018, 0 in 2019, and 0 in 2020.
The top cop provided a further breakdown for attempted murders and sexual offenses.
Attempted murder, there were 13 in 2018 and 13 in 2019 and 1 in 2020. Grievous bodily harm, there were 62 reports in 2018 against 61 in 2019 versus 41 in 2020. Sexual offenses, there were 14 sexual offenses in 2018 compared with 30 in 2019 and 15 in 2020. Breaking offenses, in 2018 there were 217 versus 128 in 2019 and now 100 in 2020.
Larceny and robberies.
Larcenies, 247 in 2018 versus 176 in 2019, now 116 in 2020. Robberies, 24 in 2018, 28 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. Firearm offenses, 14 in 2018, 22 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. Malicious damage, 124 in 2018 and 74 in 2019 and now 76 in 2020. This is the only category of crime that shows an increase for 2020, an increase of 2 crimes. This brings us to a grand total of 918 in 2018 and 697 in 2019 and 399 in 2020, a difference of 298 crime less, 43% reduction.
Commissioner of Police Hilroy Brandy.
The government's been explaining why it is so cautious about reopening the borders of the Federation. Prime Minister Timothy Harris says the necessary protocols must be put in place when the authorities get to the point where it is deemed prudent to open the borders. He was speaking on the Leadership Matters program.
Of course, the science is still evolving, and we are all looking at what is happening in countries where the borders have opened. And part of the strategy must be to minimize the occurrence of some of those negatives, to contain the probability of any spread as a result of the opening of the borders. So we continue to work on that matter. We expect that a proposal will come to the cabinet, and after that proposal from the technicians or the technical team is considered by cabinet, then a decision will be made and the public will be advised.
The Prime Minister indicated that the government has to strive for, quote, that delicate balance between people's livelihoods and their lives.
And we have moved from a situation where all entities were constrained to a situation now where literally every entity is able to participate in some way within the context of the regulation in socio-economic life. And so that has been very good progress. In fact, in some respects, we have moved further and in a more orderly way in opening up of the economy than many other countries and societies have. So we are working hard, and we are working and taking not just our own counsel, but we are benefiting from regional and other organizations which are making inputs with regard to issues of border management, border control. And so over the last couple of weeks, there have been meetings at the heads of government level to look at the opening up of borders, trying, as it were, to find and to formulate a common approach to that. And of course, there have been discussions over the last couple of days at the level of the OECS regarding the matter of opening up of the borders. Everywhere, though, the advice is that it has to be done in a very thoughtful way, and it has to be done in a way where one is careful that the second surge, if it were to come, could be even more difficult than the first one. And so we continue to advise persons as we move along to be very much aware that COVID-19 is still with us.
All of the Federation's 15 confirmed COVID-19 cases are said to have recovered fully.
Cretaceans currently in the United States are pleading with the government to assist them with returning home amidst the coronavirus pandemic. The borders of St. Kitts and Nevis are closed with no confirmed date set for when it will reopen. That means no commercial passenger flights will be operating on a scheduled basis to the RLB International Airport or the Vance Armory International Airport. Currently, approximately 100 nationals are in the United States awaiting an exit flight to Basseterre. One such person is Vernon Thomas, who is pleading for the government to assist as the United States continues to see a spike in cases.
Criticians in the U.S., need to know what's the government position on stranded nationals in the U.S. who is in dire need of coming home, seeing that other countries, other islands are accepting home their nationals. We as criticians in New York need to know what's the position with us. Most of the time, most of us have paid for our ticket to come back home. But the problem is that the airline keep cancelling our flight until later date. Some of us try to get onto the consulate, and most of the time, sometimes you get to something you don't get to. So people is criticism up here is hurting. That is our problem. Nobody's saying nothing. We can't get to nobody, and people need to go home. People just cash stricken. We don't have any cash. It's rough with us up here.
Thomas tells Win FM that with no confirmed date set for the reopening of the airports, they have been faced with cancelled flights.
Every time you book your flight, they tell you when they give you a date. A few days after, they call you and they tell you okay, the flights are cancelled. When you ask them when they're going to fly to St. Kitts, they give you a month or two. They tell you, well, okay, they don't know. You know, things are that sad. When you ask for a refund, they tell you, well, okay, no, they don't give any refund, so we just left you in the limbo. You know, people need to come home. I've spoken to people in Virginia, in Connecticut, in New Jersey, you know. Everybody just frustrated. See that other Caribbean countries, Antigua, Trinidad, St. Lucia, Guyana, Jamaica, you know, everybody trying to bring home the nationals.
The petition maintains that he's open to undertaking the necessary quarantine protocols to protect against the spread of the virus in the Federation.
But we don't mind because we're coming home. You know, we're coming home, and and if it's protocol to, if it's protocol basically that we have to adhere to, well, it's home we come in. We don't mind.
Police have captured 3 of the Haitians who were on the run from law enforcement officials who swooped down on a location in Keys Village on Monday. Police, soldiers, and immigration officials descended on a house in Keys and removed a group of 10 people, all males. Late Tuesday, WinFM was told that police recaptured 2 of the men Monday evening in the mountain areas of Keys, while another was taken into custody Tuesday morning. WinFM understands that 2 more individuals are still on the run and are still being hunted by police. Law enforcement officials have not issued a statement on the incident up to news time Tuesday evening. However, a number of questions are still unanswered surrounding the detainment of the group. Among the questions outstanding are: how did law enforcement officials locate the group? How did the group get to St. Kitts and Nevis? When did they arrive in the island? And who were they staying by? WinFM asked one of the representatives from the local Haitian Association for a comment on the detainment, but he could not speak much to the arrest of the individuals since his group would be making contact with them in the coming days. WinFM has learned that the group is currently staying at a community center. Following a judgment handed down by the Court of Appeal in Guyana, the Chief Elections Officer has submitted his final report to the Elections Commission, giving the incumbent government a 2-seat majority. The report, which was submitted late Tuesday, saw the governing APNU-AFC recording 171,825 votes and the opposition PPP 166,343 votes for a total of 344,508 electors deemed credible. The incumbent maintains control of the National Assembly with 33 seats to PPP's 31 and the joint smaller parties 1. There were 65 seats on offer in the Ghana elections. More in a subsequent newscast.
I need justice for him.
That's Yonette Harris, mother of deceased police constable Brian Packett, calling for justice for her son. It has been 4 years since the then police constable was shot and subsequently succumbed to his leg injury. The 34-year-old was shot and injured on June 23, 2016, reportedly accidentally by his colleague Bijan Warner. Police reported at the time that Packett responded to a larceny in progress in Greenlands. Reports indicate that while returning from the scene, he and a colleague observed a suspicious individual. Upon engaging the person, a physical altercation reportedly occurred, with Packett sustaining a gunshot wound to his leg. He was subsequently flown to Trinidad and Tobago for treatment, where he later succumbed. The matter was forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, who recommended charges against Warner. An emotional Miss Harris, during an interview with WinFM on Tuesday, disclosed that she had not received any support from the government or the police.
Well, I'm the only one fighting for him right now. I'm his mother. I'm alone in my battle.
Okay.
I'm alone in my battle fighting for justice for him. No, I've been calling and no one is giving me nothing, no answers, nothing. They have me in the dark, nothing.
WinFM reached out to the Commissioner of Police, Hilroy Brandy, for a comment on the latest with the investigation, where he disclosed that the young man is still fighting extradition. He tells WinFM that the topic of assistance is still with the Attorney General, who is working to understand who should receive the benefit. According to media reports, Warner was able to leave St. Kitts and Nevis and travel to Barbados, return to the Federation, then fly out to the United States. Packett, his mother's eldest son, was described as a loving individual who looked out for everyone, including his family.
Well, he is a very quiet person, a very willing, helping, educated person. He spoke 7 different languages. If you have got nothing and it's $1 he has, he stretch his hands to help you. That's what the kind of person he was. Look out for his sisters and brothers to make sure they have something to eat. That's the kind of person he was, going forward. All he wanted to do is rule his destiny and help them out in life. And his life was just taken from him. Yes, that was it. Because preparing to come over to St. Kitts, I talked to him the night before, and that was just, I don't know, that was a surprise. This is just a show-off for me.
Investigation into the matter are ongoing.
Miguel Favre, NBC Prime. Former chairman of the St. Lucia Labour Party and former Senate President Claudius Francis has been reflecting on the life of close friend, the late Kenneth Foster QC. Foster passed away last Thursday at the age of 89, surrounded by family. Claudius Francis has known the late attorney since his youth and touted Foster's sporting prowess, eloquence, charm, and revered career as a criminal defense attorney. But we questioned the former Senate President about Kenneth Foster's relationship with the late Sir John Compton. Despite being political adversaries, they share a common history, schoolmates at both the St. Mary's College and the London School of Economics. And our discussion led us to a topic relevant to today's political climate.
In fact, it's funny you mention that, Miguel, because with all of the debate going on about the Deputy Speaker, in 1979, we were in the status of associated statehood, which meant we had internal government, ministers, save and except the British were still responsible for our external and our defense. So all of the members of Sir John's cabinet were already in place when we became independent, 22nd of February 1979.
By the 22nd, the late Sir John transitioned from Premier to Prime Minister with a full cabinet of ministers. But the post of Deputy Speaker to the late St. Clair Daniel became vacant. And following discussion from the then Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, Sirs John Compton and Alan Nuisi,
Kenneth Foster volunteered to be Deputy Speaker.
Even from the opposition?
From the opposition. But it was on the understanding that he already knew elections were just a couple, because the last set of elections were in 1974, and the elections were due in 1979. And at the time, of course, there was the public service strike in full effect, the longest public service strike in our history. And Ken agreed for the Parliament to continue. He would sit as Deputy Speaker.
Kenneth Foster served in that position for the next 4.5 months until John Compton's first and only defeat at the polls as leader of the United Workers' Party.
Well, Kenneth Foster was a lawyer of no mean repute. Kenneth Foster was very well aware of what was discussed and the document that came out of the discussions in England. He knew that anyone could be Deputy Speaker, but that it was certainly incumbent upon the government to place a Deputy Speaker, as it is the government's agenda that is being passed in the House, not the opposition's agenda. So if in fact you don't have a Deputy Speaker, then you have a position where the government is stagnant.
Kenneth Foster served as Minister of Communications and Works during the failed 79-82 SLP administration, which was plagued by infighting and the formation of factions as a result of a leadership struggle. Miguel Favre, NBC Prime.
This is Al Jazeera.
A watershed moment that will cause the most serious violation of international law. That's how UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has described Israel's plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. Members of the UN Security Council and the Arab League have been meeting to discuss Israel's move, which could be put into motion as soon as next week. Most of them were united in their opposition, with warnings that Israel's unilateral action could trigger a major escalation in the region.
If implemented, these steps could dramatically alter local dynamics, triggering instability across the occupied Palestinian territory and maybe beyond. This conflict has been marked by periods of extreme violence, but never before has the risk of escalation been accompanied by a political horizon so distant, an economic situation so fragile, and a region so volatile. It is crucial for all stakeholders to take action that will enable the parties to step back from the brink.
Well, opposition is also coming from Europe. More than 1,000 politicians have signed a letter urging their leaders to stop Israel. While on the ground in the Jordan Valley, in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza, there have been renewed protests against the US-backed Israeli plans. We have several correspondents covering developments. Nida Ibrahim is in the Jordan Valley. Harry Fawcett is keeping an eye on the situation for us from West Jerusalem. But first, let's join our diplomatic editor, James Bays, who's at the United Nations. James, what more did the UN Secretary-General have to say?
Well, there were strong comments from the UN Secretary-General, very, very clear that this would be a severe violation of international law and a threat to the two-state solution. This is really, he believes, I think, his last chance to try and persuade the Israelis to think again, that this would be a very, very big mistake for peace in the region, but also for Israel itself. I have to say his comments are no surprise, because the UN's position on this has been set for a very long time. In fact, I'd go as far as say set for about 52 years, since the 1967 war, when Israel at that point took parts of Jerusalem, it took the West Bank and Gaza. They were declared occupied territories. Yes, since then we've had Israelis letting settlers take part of that land, but never before have we had Israel saying that it's going to permanently say it politically controls those areas, that they are Israeli annexation. That's why this is such a big deal, and that's why many believe this could be the end of the whole idea of the Oslo process and the two-state solution.
And what's the US had to say about this, James?
Well, we heard in the meeting from Kelly Craft, who is the US ambassador to the United Nations. Worth telling you that on the Security Council there are 15 members, and it's pretty clear to me they're all one by one speaking, and in fact the last one of them is France that's speaking right now, the current president of the Security Council. They all, 14 of them, support the position of the Secretary-General, say annexation would be an appalling idea and a breach of international law. The only one that doesn't support that position is the United States. Ambassador Craft making it clear that the best way forward was for people to engage with the Trump plan, but of course most of the international community have rejected that plan and don't see it as a particularly serious option. Worth telling you that while Kelly Craft was speaking, her boss was speaking as well, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he seemed to suggest that it was up to the Israelis whether annexation should take place, so potentially a green light, but I believe you'll be hearing more on that a little later.
We may well be back with you, James, within this news hour for further analysis. For the moment, though, many thanks indeed, our diplomatic editor James Bays there at the UN. Here is why Israel's annexation plans are so controversial. The occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is part of historic Palestine, which, as James was saying there, has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. In over half a century, Israel has built around 250 settlements and outposts in violation of international law. More than 640,000 Israelis live there. These illegal settlements are spread across the West Bank, which makes a future Palestinian state nearly impossible. Last year, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, unveiled his plan to unilaterally declare Israel's sovereignty over these settlements built on occupied land. It also included the most fertile part of the occupied West Bank, known as the Jordan Valley. In a radical shift from previous US policies, President Donald Trump in January proposed that America would recognize Israeli settlements as part of his Middle East peace plan. Let's speak now to Al Jazeera's Harry Fawcett, who's live for us in West Jerusalem. What's the Israeli government response, Harry, to all of this outpouring of criticism?
Well, we haven't heard it yet. We will hear from the Israeli ambassador in due course at the UN meeting. I think what Benjamin Netanyahu will be considering, though, is to what extent the warnings that we're getting from all of these speakers, to what extent he's already potentially priced them in to his annexation plans, and also what will be the outcome of the discussions that are currently going on in Washington, D.C. among senior US officials as to how much to greenlight, whether to greenlight the annexation. There were some clues in Kelly Craft, the US ambassador to the UN, in her speech a little earlier. She talked about it needing courageous Israeli leadership to make the tough choices required. Now, that could be a signal that the United States may potentially want some kind of explicit acceptance of a Palestinian state, which is in the Trump plan, albeit one which is much smaller and much more constricted than the Palestinians want, hence the rejection of it by the Palestinian president and senior Palestinian leadership, especially given the fact that it would also see 30% of the occupied West Bank being annexed under that plan. But to sell it to right-wingers, to settlers, it may be difficult for Netanyahu if he has to, at the same time, acknowledge and publicly endorse a Palestinian state.
That was the WinFM Headline News, brought to you by KDP Enterprises, Caribbean Alliance, Carrie Brewery, CNC Trading, The Grange.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic, and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 466-8221, or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Till you walk with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealey Walwyn, people you can trust.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime, and bitters. Live, love, be.
Found the sound 98.9. FM.
When is the last time that you've had lunch or dinner away from home? The ambience of Sweet Cane on Port Zante provides you with that touch. Sweet Cane daily specials include burgers, wraps, soup, and tasty seafood dishes. Sweet Cane also caters for events and special parties. Call our Sweet Cane hotline at 465-4345 or 665-7628. Sweet Cane, they've got the touch.
Local weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis valid up to 8 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, 25th June. Synopsis. Dry and stable conditions will restrict any significant shower activity across the area. Meanwhile, a decline in Saharan dust levels will be seen across the area today. Today's weather, sunny and slightly hazy. Tonight's weather, partly cloudy and slightly hazy, with a 20% or a slight chance of showers. Local weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis, valid up to 8 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, 25th June. Synopsis. Dry and stable conditions will restrict any significant shower activity across the area. Meanwhile, a decline in Saharan dust levels will be seen across the area today. Today's weather, sunny and slightly hazy. Tonight's weather, partly cloudy and slightly hazy, and slightly hazy with a 20% or a slight chance of showers. Winds east at 19 to 33 kilometers or 10 to 18 knots, with gusts up to 52 kilometers or 28 knots. Seas 1.5 to 2.1 meters or 5 to 7 feet. A small craft caution is in effect. Today's sunset 6:48 p.m. Tomorrow's sunrise 5:39 a.m.
When is the last time that you've had lunch or dinner away from home? The ambience of Sweet Cane on Port Zante provides you with that touch. Sweet Cane daily specials include burgers, wraps, soup, and tasty seafood dishes. Sweet Cane also caters for events and special parties. Call our Sweet Cane hotline at 465-4345 or 665-7628. Sweet Cane, they've got the touch.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
Well, a very good afternoon to you, and time to welcome you now to the second segment of Voices on Win FM 90.9.
This is an unprecedented announcement from Horseman's. Get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. It's Horseman's Automotive Unprecedented Sales Event happening now. Yes, for the first time ever, you get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Yes, pay zero VAT and get up to $30,000 off on top of that. This has never been seen before. Unprecedented savings at the Unprecedented Auto Sales Event at Horseman's Automotive. Up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Let me repeat, up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Don't miss this, it's unprecedented. Terms and conditions apply.
Flow helps you stay connected to what matters. Simple plans and a better network mean that you can enjoy 30 days of unlimited social messaging, 10 gigabytes of reliable data to use as you like, and 1,000 local anywhere calls and texts. With the always-on prepaid plan, all for $100. Keep your number when you switch to St. Kitts' most reliable LTE network. Switch to Flow. It only gets better.
Flow's new combo plan, the people's plan. Combo. Got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow.
I want a combo, but not for my belly. I feel me cell phone, so me call anybody. Call Mr. Man, call Granny. On the island, Flow come combo me.
Yes, there is no need for to force no more. Cause with Flow combo plan, you're paying less for more.
Flow got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow.
Dial star 129 number sign to activate your combo plan today.
This is an unprecedented announcement from Horseman's. Get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. It's Horseman's Automotive Unprecedented Sales Event happening now. Yes, for the first time ever, you get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Yes, pay zero VAT and get up to $30,000 off on top of that. This has never been seen before. Unprecedented savings at the Unprecedented Auto Sales Event at Horseman's Automotive. Up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Let me repeat, up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Don't miss it. It's unprecedented. Terms and conditions apply.
You tune in with FM is 90.9 on your dial. And thank you so much for joining the second segment of Voices today. This morning we featured presentations at the Pandemic and Tourism and Pandemic Digital Dialogue organized by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, featuring the Governor, Timothy Antoine, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastanet, as well as Mr. Vincent Vanterpool, former SG of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. The second half of the program will continue with that discussion. It's quite interesting, dealing with the issues of tourism, the reopening of borders, coping with COVID-19, and a top-class panel to discuss those issues for you. It is indeed a privilege to be able to listen to these gentlemen discuss this very important issue. So we'll continue with more. We'll continue with a question being posed by Governor Antoine to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Chastanet.
Prime Minister, what is the proposed quarantine period for St. Lucia?
Right. Right now it's 14 days, but once we are testing either pre-arrival or once you're in. So for our nationals, we're going to keep them in quarantine for 7 days and then test them after 7 days. If they have tested negative, then they will be free to go back to their homes. And normally, if they test positive, they would have to remain in quarantine. For our hotel guests right now, they're tested and they're staying really on island for 7 days and then returning home. So given the limited capacity we have, which is 330 rooms dedicated towards administrated quarantining, we can't afford to do it for 14 days anymore. So we've agreed to go to 7 days, test the person. If they've tested negative, we'll let them out.
Okay, right. Thanks for that. I think in one country, I think it's Iceland. I understand that they test you at the airport, and if you are negative, you're released, no restrictions. If not, you have to go into quarantine until, of course, you're resolved. Right.
So we would, Governor, we would like to do that, but that's what I'm saying to you, that for the first 30 days, this is what we're going to put in place.
Right.
And based on the results of persons being tested, to Vincent's point, if it's 1.5% of coming in, so that's 15 people of every 1,000, and you're looking to get over 2,000 tourists coming in a week, we have to hope that his numbers are wrong, and that's what the testing is all about.
Right. Okay, let's take another question. Vincent, sorry, if you wish to comment, you may. Do you want to say anything?
No.
Okay, all right. So we go to another question. What happens when a person decides to do the pre-flight testing while others are on the same flight choose post-flight testing? And several people who chose post-flight testing turn up positive. There are several cases now of flights that had 0 cases pre-flight and multiple cases post-flight. This means that persons can contract the virus from others on flight or in flight. In this regard, surely this then poses the requirement to quarantine the whole flight. Surely the only foolproof way is to both pre-flight and post-flight testing. Long question, but I don't know if you got the gist of it.
And this is the dilemma that we have. So if you want to reopen in July, it's going to require these countries to approve either giving people the option of being pre-tested or the option of being tested on arrival. The airlines will not accept pre-testing by itself. They don't believe that they'll be able to generate enough business to warrant the flight. The other part that's changed, and certainly pre-COVID and before we really knew about it, and even in the February and March period, the airlines weren't practicing any protocols. Now people are being sanitized before they get on the plane. The plane itself is being sanitized. There's limited interaction and movement of people on the flight, and persons are being asked to wear their mask. In some cases, the middle seat is being left open during this particular period. So we have to assume that if a person is positive on the plane, given those protocols, they would be limited. Also, in the lead up to COVID, whenever we tested somebody who was positive on a flight, it's only the persons in their immediate area that we would put on our contact tracing schedule and assess whether in fact that they have contracted it or not. So it doesn't mean the entire plane has to be stopped. And we think that the risk is there, but the risk has certainly been minimized significantly, even if there are positive persons on that flight.
Okay, thanks. Let's take another question. This question is for Prime Minister Chasney. Countries such as Jamaica have implemented home quarantine rather than state quarantine for persons coming directly from countries with similar or better COVID-19 control system. In other words, travel bubble countries. Will St. Lucia consider a similar approach given the limited availability of hotel rooms?
This is the toughest question. This is the toughest question to answer. Our experience has been that home quarantining has not worked. And in fact, when we trusted home quarantining, that's when we had the greatest potential for an outbreak. It's when we decided to put everybody into compulsory quarantining that we were able to contain the virus spread here in St. Lucia. So 90% of the persons eventually who became positive were already in quarantine, and therefore it restricted the spread considerably. We are contemplating having a home quarantining program. It would depend on the home being inspected, that the facilities are there for them to have a bedroom by themselves. and whether in fact the technology that Vincent has been speaking about to keep track of persons in case that they're breaking quarantining, these are all being contemplated. But right now, Governor, we are made the decision, certainly during the pilot phase, that we would not allow home quarantining as an option. What we will allow is for other hotels to become quarantine stations, and that there will be a price for those. So if you want to come home and have to be in quarantine and you don't have the money to pay for it, then you would have to book that hotel and schedule your flight accordingly. If you want to come down because our facilities are full, you are free to use one of the other facilities we have, but you will be required to pay.
All right.
Governor,
yes, please.
Yeah. No, it's without comment, but just to tell you, for example, what is being contemplated here in the Bahamas beginning on July 1st is they have expanded. With June 15th, they started to allow people coming in by boats and yachts, because Florida is quite nearby, that they could have their negative test 10 days before they depart for the Bahamas. Now, the obvious question to be asked, what are they doing in those 10 days, if it's a full 10 days, to avoid contamination? There is no way to guarantee that. Then on the second side, because so many people being so close to Miami, and we've seen what is happening in Miami, and now the plan is to allow somebody to travel for 72 hours to Miami from the Bahamas, a Bahamian, and return without any pre-testing. Everybody else has to be pre-tested, but the Bahamian coming back pre-tested, and that Bahamian is being asked to go into quarantine on arrival. Well, I will suspect that the behavior of Bahamian is very much like a St. Lucian in terms of remaining in self-quarantine for any extended period of time. And so one of the issues is that we have really such a variety of approaches that one of the things we should, that's why I like this idea of a 30 to 45 day review. At the end of that period of time, really just look across the region and see what we can learn from it in terms of determining what seems to be the best approach to get this kind of minimum impact on our local communities while we coexist with COVID. So we're gonna have a variety of approaches, I think, over the next couple months, from which I think we in the region can learn a great deal of information if we begin to pool our knowledge.
Thanks for that. Next question, is pre-flight testing available to St. Lucians traveling out of St. Lucia? And what are the implemented policies upon their return?
So there is no pre-requirement to travel by any of the other countries to be pre-tested. So America doesn't require St. Lucians to be tested before they come into the States. The UK right now puts everybody into quarantining, and so does Canada. And there are no flights that are currently flying to make it there. So if in fact persons needed to be pre-tested, then we do have the capacity to pre-test people before they left.
Right. And just a quick question, who is paying for those tests? So in all the testing that is proposed, who's going to be paying? Is it the customer, the guest, or the government?
You like to really ask these tough questions.
Well,
So
I know revenue is at a premium, so I have to ask who's paying.
Yeah. So in theory, some countries have implemented it where the guest is going to pay for it. And I can say to you that I know that there are tourists who are coming down, and one, refusing to be tested, and two, that they're refusing to pay. And this is a problem. Some hoteliers have indicated that they're prepared to include in their packages that if people get tested, pre-tested, they're willing to give them a reimbursement. And also the government is saying that if you are pre-tested, then you can be fast-tracked through the airport. So we're really doing our best, Governor, to cause people to be tested before they arrive, but certainly to accommodate the airlines that we have to give the option of people being tested on arrival, and that test is being paid for by the state.
See, another demand on the state. I feel that. No, I mean, obviously you have to do what you have to do. I know in Iceland, the customer pays, the tourist pays, I think it's 100 US for the test. But you did say that those who we are receiving do not want to pay.
Yeah, but I think, Governor, one of the things that we kind of forget is that, maybe I'm old enough to remember this, but once upon a time, you were required to get and pay for and show your vaccination papers before you can travel to various places. So it is not out of the realm of possibility. Now, $100 is a lot of money. I suspect the price of that is going to come down, that over a period of time, the customer will be far more comfortable paying for it. I think the cleverest solution is what the Prime Minister talked about, where that pre-test cost is included in the package so that it's a hidden cost. So somebody gets a reimbursement for it, in that you go and get the test, pay for it, you get reimbursed for it on your arrival or some other value or advantage. The other thing too is, after 9/11, I remember all the hue and cry about all of the cost associated with putting these security systems in place. Now it's normal that people going through this security and going some of these kind of experiences. So I think we are the early stages of people rejecting the idea of paying for some of these things, because over a period of time, I think when they become part of the new normal, I think you're going to find a lot more people who are prepared to pay for it. And I suspect the price of it is going to go down over a period of time in any event.
Okay, let's go back to our listeners, viewers. Let's take a couple more questions, please. So, Prime Minister, this one is for you again. The European Union recently announced that if the US, which has 4% of the world's population, yet 25% of the coronavirus cases, does not put measures in place to reduce the spread, they will close their borders for travel from the US. In St. Lucia, hotels are preparing themselves to receive tourists from the US, and some expect to get guests from as early as July, which coincidentally is around the same time the experts in the US have advised they expect the number of cases and deaths to spike. Is it wise to open our borders at this time to the US, knowing what is being forecast? You kind of spoke to that, but it's a question, so if you wish to respond again, you may.
It's actually a very easy answer to the question. The governor of California likened what we were going through to a light switch. And what he said is that the worst thing to try to do is to deal with this with an on and off switch. And that this really requires us to have a dimmer switch. So there is no definitive answer on any one day to anything. It's not either yes or no. The dimmer switch allows you to always adjust the lights to where it needs to be. And so the information is changing daily. I mean, who would have expected Black Lives Matter marches to go on for 26 days in America? And what impact has that had on the increase in the number of cases that are taking place? The conflict in the states as to whether to open or whether to close, the ability of individual states to be able to make those decisions by themselves. There's so many intangibles that are at play here that as a prime minister and as a country, we use a dimmer switch. And so like everything else in life, we have a plan that's 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of time. But those plans are always subject to change based on the information changing.
Yes. I could only imagine how difficult this is for you and for heads around our region, because you obviously want to protect our people, citizens and residents. But there is only so many government resources available. And in some of the initial adjustment or response included, for example, loan deferral programs for up to 6 months. People already begin to ask me, and I'm sure you're hearing the same thing, well, what happens after 6 months if the situation is not back to some kind of normalcy, which at this point is unlikely. You spoke about government revenues being down by 50-60%. So that is the challenge we see. Protect, yes, but some attempt to reopen has to begin to bring something back, because the state itself, as I understand it, does not have the wherewithal to continually underwrite these safety net programs, which have been offered since March or April. Sorry, that was more comment than a question, but I'm just the concern that I get.
It is a question, Governor, and so, you know, persons get very upset with me sometimes when we talk about that this is really, sadly, about numbers. And everything in life is relative. So we can sit here today where St. Lucia has 0 COVID cases, and construction can be taking place. Persons are going to the beach to enjoy themselves. People are being able to go back to church. People are able to go back to their family homes. And yes, there is very economically dire situation. And yes, there are persons who are extremely stressed out about what the future holds for them. But that pales in comparison of prematurely opening up our doors, getting back into a situation in which we have to go back into a lockdown and nothing is happening. So sometimes we have to appreciate, as bad as what we have, that it's pretty good. Right. I would not want to know what I would have to do when I woke up in the morning, confronted with the fact that I have 80 cases of COVID. And I have community members calling me to say to me, Prime Minister, my auntie is dying and she needs to get on a ventilator. And you need to help me, because if you don't help me, she's going to die. We've not had to make that choice. And that's the reality. And so as bad as it is, Governor, my knees and pray, I do. And I realize that October is not that far away. So if the choice is that we have to open up the economy without having any levels of controls and literally throw out of the door everything that we have learned till now, and take the risk that we get cases and now we have even a bigger battle on our hands, I'd rather stay the way I am, and I'd rather go house to house, institute more prayer in our country, get everybody to understand that we are each other's brothers' keepers, and that we all have to help each other out during this very difficult period. But certainly to open up our countries when we know the limitations that we have in dealing with an outbreak. We could not cope with what took place in New York. We could not cope with what took place in Italy. We cannot cope with what's taking place in some other parts of the world, Brazil, Argentina, Peru. We can't cope with that, Governor. And so I can say to you as the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, I am not prepared to just open up the door. I am prepared to go through a phase basis. I am prepared to be able to work on the basis of science and numbers and statistics and understand what the exposure is going to be, and that we're going to make decisions collectively together. But I can say to you, I don't lose any sleep over the dilemma as to whether I have to open up my doors, because I'm certainly one of those that believes that the Caribbean, and particularly, Governor, your OECS, has shown how mature we are and in terms of how we've handled the situation. And I do not think that we should throw away or waste that success that we've had.
You know, and just to add a little bit, Governor, you see, the one thing that's underlying all of this discussion, and particularly when we start talking about North America, every single piece of research I've seen in the last 6 months has said the #1 desired place for people to travel internationally from North America today, before the pandemic, and especially in the pandemic, is the Caribbean. So we have sitting here, I think, the greatest demand. The one way for us to screw that up is to all of a sudden, and by the way, there is an intuitive belief that islands can control these pandemics far better than, for example, states. There is no boundary around a state that allows people to stop at the border and be admitted. So it's almost an impossible situation in the United States where interstate travel allows people to move around. I mean, the best analogy I ever heard in my entire life, somebody said, is like having a blanking section in a swimming pool. There is no such thing because it contaminates the whole thing. But an island, and St. Lucia is an outstanding example of that, can contain it. But the one thing that we've learned through all of this is that, there is no plan that survives first contact with reality. You got to be prepared to learn from what you just did and then be nimble and flexible in managing it. And the idea, and forgive me for beating this horse for a long time, the idea is simple. You have to open up gradually and learn from it. Then you decide what you're going to do. But just to throw the doors open is, I think, is pretty reckless and irresponsible.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you both, gentlemen, is that just as at the domestic level, we ease restrictions, and as we saw science and as we saw actual impact on the ground, we made decisions, you made decisions. You are now proposing to do the same at the international level. Gradual reopening, testing and learning, and by testing, I don't mean just the COVID-19 test, but the piloting, the experience of going easy, learning from a sample. You said, Prime Minister, the next 4 to 6 weeks, sort of, and then based on that, and of course what's going on in the source markets, making a decision on what happens next. Do you release further, ease the restrictions further? Do you have to recalibrate or calibrate as you learn from? That's what I'm hearing from you. Because as you said,
Absolutely.
We are learning to live with this thing, and learning to live with it means, and Vincent made the point, we have to learn as we go. We don't have all the answers up front.
Absolutely. And look, the UK government now is talking about creating a bubble with some countries in the world. I would have to imagine the Caribbean would be one of those bubbles. Most of the British agencies I've spoken to relish the idea of pre-testing. In fact, even going about making pre-testing available at the airport. And making it affordable for persons to do so. In Canada, you can get pre-tested for free or for 30 Canadian dollars. And from the feedback I'm getting, most Canadians want to be pre-tested and like the idea. I mean, we have hotel guests right now in St. Lucia that flew in on private planes, were pre-tested.
Yep.
And I had the opportunity of meeting one of them, and I said, why did you come to St. Lucia? She said, because you required pre-testing.
Right.
And I like the idea. I feel comfortable knowing that this is what the country's done. I saw interviews with guests coming into Jamaica, even going through the 2.5-hour process, said, I liked that. I liked it because it gave me the sense that something good is happening. And they also like the fact that Jamaica is making available to all the guests that are coming to Jamaica a dashboard of the number of cases they've had, the number of deaths they had, the number of people who've recovered, and the daily count, and where those people are coming from. And so they like the idea that that information is being shared with them. We need to stop thinking that people are going to reject this kind of intrusion or kind of information and think of it as negatively. There are some people out there, as I said early, who think of it positively. And there are some people who don't. And the key is, what are those numbers? But I know that the airlines, who I very much appreciate, what they're doing for St. Lucia and for the Caribbean. If in St. Lucia was to have a major outbreak, I don't think that there's any one of those CEOs I could call and say, hey, can you send me down some respirators? Hey, can you help fly some people up to some of my other countries? And that's not to say anything bad about them, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. And, it brings up a bigger subject, Governor, that you and I have spoken about, this need of managing our economies, this idea of deficit governments, not building up enough reserves, and understanding that on a global basis, the global architecture is not there to support small island developing states. It's too difficult, but I would rather go and fight that fight than to put my population in any further health risk when I know that I'm not going to get the necessary help. We will get plenty of empathy, as you know, Governor, but that empathy is never accompanied by the necessary support that we need.
Correct, indeed. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go back to the questions. Let's see, what do we have? So there's a question here on the cruise side, so maybe we could just take that one. We've noted that cruise lines have voluntarily suspended all trips out of the U.S. ports until September 15. This is encouraging as we have a definitive time frame for the restart of the cruise season. Should cruise passengers be required to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken 48 to 72 hours prior to arrival if they are to participate in import tours and activities? So yeah, perhaps we could stop it there. Any response to that, the cruise side of things?
Well, I'll just say really quickly that we all have to be very careful because these are two sectors, land-based tourism and cruise tourism, that continuously see each other as competitors. And if we allow our land-based tourists to come back to our countries without pre-testing, then it's going to be very difficult to cause the cruise industry not to go through the same. And, you know, there is this mutual respect that has to take place at all times. The cruise line also has to be comforted in knowing that when persons come on land to do a tour, that they're not going to be exposed and therefore coming back on the ship. And so the protocols that are going to be required for the cruise industry, dialogue has begun. I have not seen even a draft paper coming out yet. I don't know, Vincent, if there's been one since our last dialogue, but certainly what we did in February and March in terms of regionally how to deal with the cruise industry and COVID, there needs to be now a document prepared as to how we're going to now work with the cruise industry, because this is a tough one. You know, these are people going to multiple islands and coming into the heart of your country, your markets, your taxi drivers, attractions, restaurants, meeting vendors, very interactive with your economy. And therefore, they don't have the benefit of bringing people to an isolated beach or restricting persons because they're coming for that genuine, authentic interaction with our economies. So this is going to take some thought. I'm not sure when the cruise industry is going to restart. Certainly, I would imagine what's going on in the States is not helping. And certainly bringing Europeans into our waters at this point, because they would have to go through Miami to get here, is not working. But it may potentially, Governor, increase the opportunity for home porting for us, for Europe, before the end of the year.
I see.
One of the things that we are hopeful, the cruise conversation is just beginning. And obviously beginning with those destinations that have in fact cruises coming to them. Because what is very clear to me is that there has to be, you have no choice but to have a single set of protocols in place regarding what's going to be required for cruises. Because a significant proportion of the cruises coming into our region are multi-destination cruises. They don't just come to one place. So you can't have a set of protocols in one place that is different to work on that. But the point that I think PM makes is that you can't have one set of protocols for the air passenger and a completely different set of protocols for the cruise passenger. So I suspect it's going to be guided by what's going to be in place for the air passenger at the time. And also, we're going to very quickly have to come to the conclusion that whatever exists in one place is the same kind of protocols that need to exist elsewhere. Because
well, as Mr. Vincent Vanterpool, I interrupted there. I'm just responding to the issue of having the cruise ships back, having tourism up and running, what it will require. A very interesting and enlightening dialogue there. Mr. Vanterpool Wallace, as well as the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastanet, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine. We thank them very much. There's more. It's available on the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's website, on the Facebook page. You can get the entire program there. When the family have it up, it just ended just about an hour ago, those discussions. So I think it's worth your time to listen to what is said. Of course, you're going to have your own thoughts about it, but I think it's proven to be quite interesting and time well spent. So you're listening to Win FM. It's 98.9, 13 minutes after the hour of 1 o'clock. As Voices compliments SL Hospital and Company Limited and Flow.
This is an unprecedented announcement from Horseman's. Get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. It's Horseman's Automotive Unprecedented Sales Event happening now. Yes, for the first time ever, you get up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Yes, pay zero VAT and get up to $30,000 off on top of that. This has never been seen before. Unprecedented savings at the Unprecedented Auto Sales Event at Horseman's Automotive. Up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Let me repeat, up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Don't miss this. It's unprecedented. Terms and conditions apply.
Flow helps you stay connected to what matters. Simple plans and a better network mean that you can enjoy 30 days of unlimited social messaging, 10 gigabytes of reliable data to use as you like, and 1,000 local anywhere calls and texts. With the Always On prepaid plan, all for $100. Keep your number when you switch to St. Kitts' most reliable LTE network. Switch to Flow. It only gets better.
A very good afternoon to you, caller. You're live and on the air. You're in Voices. Very good afternoon, caller. You're live and on the air.
Good afternoon, everybody in Radio Land, and good afternoon, Mr. Backus.
Yes, Mr. Pemberton. Good afternoon to you.
How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm giving thanks this afternoon. How are you?
I am doing great. And you know, every time I listen to you, I must extol your continuing professionalism. And I'm listening to you here speaking about pre-testing costs being included in some travel package for reimbursement later. And I'm telling myself, wow, every now and again, you have a paradigm shifting event. And COVID-19, we must all confess, Mr. Backus, is one such. That interview between those three highly placed and from their perspective, well-informed personages is definitely an eye-opener from that taxi man, they said, who must pay 17% tax at the gas pump, carrying his passengers, to the opportunity lost from our failure to follow up on customers who came here and fell in love with our product, the all-embracing allure of tourism impact is inescapable. Mr. Backus, economies everywhere are tottering and buckling with absolutely no industry left untouched. But I want to tell you something. I have seen our performance. Personal feelings aside, about personal individuals, we are to be commended. When we're at our best, I always said, we are the best. So I'm just going to say that regeneration after death, chaos, and disorder is a universal principle, and the post-COVID period will be no exception. We are going to make it. And since tourism is the central theme under discussion and consideration, I would like to remind the listening audience in closing with an anecdote start that most tourists, they are not high-heeled. They are normal working stiffs who save for their dream vacation. They typically save for years. On one such holiday, an irate couple, tired of listening to the annoying sound of the one-note trumpeter next door, demanded to get an audience with the manager, and they got it. They told him, look, either he moves or we move. We've paid too much for our vacation to have it ruined by that man next door. He can't even play. He keeps playing one note over and over, and it's so disturbing to us. The manager told them, well, if you insist, that can be accomplished. But I should tell you that the man who can play next door is actually the great Dizzy Gillespie, who is practicing for a series of sold-out concerts he has all over Europe for the summer. In which case, they said, leave things exactly as they are. They got it then, you see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pemberton. Much appreciated. We go back to the phone lines. Caller, you're live and on the air, and good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, caller.
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon, sir. You're live and on the air.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Backus. I don't think that many folks in the islands, particularly those who are intimately involved in the tourism industry, need convincing that tourism is the lifeblood of our economies. I think the bigger question and the more forward-looking one is whether it should remain how it was, or we have a totally new model of tourism. It was interesting to hear PM Chastney talk about branding, but he did so promoting a St. Lucia brand of, let's say, bananas and rum, as opposed to promoting a Carib banana, so to speak, and a Caribbean rum. So even at that level, I suspect that he is not committed to a Caribbean as opposed to a national brand in tourism. It's interesting, too, that the linkages with transportation were emphasized. We don't have the final say in the opening of our borders, to the extent that a lot depends on the protocols for countries and airlines that serve us. And, of course, the reaction by our clientele overseas, that is the tourists, who we hope will endure the new restrictions on international travel. I mean, they may well choose to concentrate on domestic tourism instead, rather than venture to distant places. The fact is, though, that we must realize that there are tiers of travelers. I mean, you have the permanent residents, you have temporary residents, like, for instance, the students, and then we have tourists who are just here for a short time. Okay, and we have to design protocols for all of these. I don't think one set of protocols will fit all. I think, too, that we should make adjustments on what we could control. You know, we could control intra-regional travel once it's pretty much clear that the region is COVID-free, or at least pretty close to that, okay? And we could make it less expensive for both in terms of transportation and accommodations for regional people, right? We could control a new direction in tourism totally, as a matter of fact. I mean, now it seems to be the time when many hotel properties are pretty much flat on their backs, and they may want to enter, they may be more inclined to enter into partnerships and buybacks, so that much more of the real estate that is now in accommodations can transfer to some sort of regional ownership, which I think is desirable. And we should also take advantage of the fact that so many cruise ships are packed up with nowhere to go and no passengers to carry. I would think it's an opportune time for the region to acquire a fleet of 2 or 3 ships, okay, and start a regional cruise ship industry. There's no reason why it has to be all foreign owned, okay, but obviously one island or one country can't do it. It has to be a conglomerate of a number of islands. And it's high time we initiate such a venture, Commandeer Cruise Lines, because we know that some of the regional workers are employed in these lines, as you well know. Some will return to the various islands. So it's not that we're starting from scratch. Why not extend that to the management and operation of a regional cruise line? I think this is a good time to do that. And whatever protocol is adopted at whatever port should be consistent, that, for instance, only one test needs to be done for travel through the region. Okay? That would be a good marketing tool, I think, for promotion, for tourism in the various islands. And so I think if every day was a time for more cooperation and integration, it is now. But I think the question is, will the leaders seize the moment? And that's another question altogether. But, there are definitely opportunities out there, and it's left to be seen what we eventually decide to do with them. Just some observations.
All right, thank you very much for your contribution as usual. I think the reference to the Tortuga brand, I think the reference was made about an unemployed man living outside his homeland and couldn't get a job, as the story is told, the folklore perhaps, and decided to just start doing some rum cakes. And that is the legendary story of the beginning of the Tortuga brand. And the Tortuga brand right now, as I gaze across at the website, it says here Tortuga brand is well known by more than 20 million annual Caribbean tourists and cruise ship passengers. And the Tortuga Caribbean rum cakes are the #1 export of the Cayman Islands. Named in 2020. Well, that's a very good year, really, 2020. Best cruise souvenir by Porthole Cruise Magazine for the 15th year. So there you go. I think when I read from the website, it says in 1984, while working for Cayman Airways, Captain Robert Hamilton and his wife Carleen, an in-flight supervisor, founded the Tortuga Rum Company Limited. They introduced the first rums to the Cayman Islands primarily to appeal as a souvenir to the growing tourist and cruise passengers business. So there's several stories here about the origins of the Tortuga rum. But what we know is that here you have a local product that became branded and made an industry out of it. I think the point is that there are other delicacies and wonderful things in the region that perhaps we're not doing enough with in terms of, yes, people come to enjoy it, but perhaps you can target their source markets as well, which I think is one of the points being made, by the panelists and the discussions as to how to leverage tourism, not only for those who are coming, but so that you can continue to make money even as they leave. All right, we're going to bring the curtains down on today's program of Voices. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We spent our time looking at tourism and the pandemic. It is, of course, a program put on by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, featured on Eastern Caribbean Connects. It's on the ECCB's website as well. And we had some distinguished gentlemen on that panel, 3 distinguished gentlemen. The moderator, who is the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastanet, and, of course, legendary Mr. Vanterpool Wallace as well on the program. So a very good afternoon to you and all the very best indeed. Do keep it locked to Win FM 90.9. We're going to have Working for You coming up in just a few minutes.
This is an unprecedented announcement from Horseman's. Get up to $30,000 off and pay 0 VAT on top of that. It's Horseman's Automotive Unprecedented Sales Event happening now. Yes, for the first time ever, you get up to $30,000 off and pay 0 VAT on top of that. Yes, yes. Pay zero VAT and get up to $30,000 off on top of that. This has never been seen before. Unprecedented savings at the Unprecedented Auto Sales Event at Horswoods Automotive. Up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Let me repeat. Up to $30,000 off and pay zero VAT on top of that. Don't miss it. It's unprecedented. Terms and conditions apply.
Flo's new combo plan, the people's plan. Combo. Got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow.
I want a combo, but not for my belly. I feel me cell phone, so me call anybody. Call Mr. Man, call Granny. On the island, Flow come combo me.
Yes, there is no need for to force no more. Cause with Flow combo plan, you're paying less for more.
Flow got a new combo plan. You can call anyone, no matter which network you dey on. Just use your Flow. Dial *129 # to activate your combo plan today.